Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Monday, September 12th meeting of the Green Bay Plan Commission. Go ahead and get started with a roll call. Chair Lisa Hanson, present. Vice Chair Jacob Miller.
Present.
Alder Jim Hutchinson.
Present.
Commissioner Sydney Bremer. I don't see her on right now. Let's see if she comes in a minute. Commissioner Darius Daniels.
Present.
Commissioner Ken Ravinsky.
Present.
And it looks like we've got someone new, Commissioner Michael. Go ahead and say it for me. I don't.
Parodic. Yep.
Commissioner Michael Parodic.
Present.
All right, and welcome.
Madam Chair, I have a hard leave at 7:30 p.m. tonight.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you for letting me know. All right, moving on to the approval of the agenda. Approval of the agenda for the September 12th, 2022 meeting of the Green Bay Plan Commission.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Vice Chair Miller, a second by Alder Hutchinson. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And then approval of the minutes. Approval of the minutes from the August 8th, 2022 meeting of the Green Bay Plan Commission.
So moved. Second.
Whatever way you want to take it, Lisa.
Motion by Alder Hutchinson and a second by Vice Chair Miller. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, and then moving on to regular business. Item number 1, consider with possible action to update planning division fee schedule.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll take that one if that's okay. Evening, Commissioners, as part of the 2023 budget process, staff was asked to take a look at our fee schedule. Apparently, it has not been looked at since 2006, so we felt there were probably warranted a few changes as we kind of went through and kind of identified those. So, I'm not going to read through the staff memo, but we'll just kind of highlight exactly the process staff went through. The main addition and a lot of the changes were specifically to address publication costs and public notice costs. Essentially I think it was our actual notice signs that are required to put on the property in case of rezoning. So majority of the changes where you see a $75 change, that is essentially what that change is. It's actually adding those two specific costs to the overall fee. Obviously, it's being sensitive to these fees generally do not cover all of staff costs related to each of these applications. That's not really the point of them, is to really recover a fair amount of those costs, not really to recover all of them. So we've taken a look at a fair number of those. Also took a look at several surrounding communities, in addition to communities similar to the size of Green Bay, kind of more of our comparables. I think the objective in the past is want to stay certainly in the area of being in the average or less in terms of just competitiveness for economic development's sake. So that was a factor we took a look at when we look at the variety of these different fees. And then there was one or two of them that we did identify that did have some statutory other legal limits that did come into play. So I did actually, in the staff memo that is included in your packet, I did highlight specifically the ones that we're proposing changes on. I think I'll just note that the most significant ones were related to, I think, like PUD amendments, but even that was just primarily the $75 difference on that one up to $425. And I think the one that really kind of stood up was as a jumping point were two of, I guess, the short-term rental fee. That is proposed from $100 to $500 simply because of the amount of time and energy that it is taking staff to basically manage and license those particular projects. It is becoming an increasingly shall we say, laborious task to keep track of these different entities and kind of get them through to properly license themselves. So staff that's probably the most significant increase there. We also are taking the cell tower applications up to $500 and $1,000, which is actually allowed, that's maximum allowed by state statute. So on those to actually identify, what those specific costs could be. with those, I guess we just certainly want to open it up if there are any. We did actually present this fee schedule. This is my last comment before I turn it back for any questions. We did present this fee schedule to the Home Builders Association and asked them to take a look at it. They felt, I got an email back from Ms. Pam Parrish stating that she felt that the increases were reasonable, and thank you for the chance to comment on them. So we did actually take that extra step of identifying, wanted to make sure that, especially in times with all the other costs going up, we certainly don't want to add to the problem, but we actually do have costs obviously that the city is certainly incurring as well as we do some of these things. So we feel most of these changes were pretty reasonable, but certainly wanted to, before we take them to the city council as part of the overall fee schedule update, wanted to have the plan commission a chance to review and comment on them before we take them forward. So with that, I will answer any questions anybody may have.
Go ahead, Alder Hutchinson.
Okay, thank you, Neil. I have a question on, it seems a new fee for home occupation. It was $0, now it's $25, and then annual is $10. Can you explain what that fee is for?
Yep, that's essentially when there are a certain number of home occupations allowed in various districts. Essentially, to being able to identify them, they do try to. Most communities do require those to be somewhat registered with the city, in case there is a problem related to traffic, parking, or noxious issues. Somebody's doing something, they turn their garage into a full-scale bakery that's going 24/7 kind of thing. It just allows the city primarily to let us know that it's there, and if there is any sort of logistics or regulatory actions we need to take, it just kind of helps us establish a record of that business being there. So it is essentially that we had not had identified previously, but obviously with the pandemic and other things going on, we are seeing that as an increasingly common question we are getting asked for in terms of what do they have to do to operate a business outside of out of their home. So that is where that fee specifically came from.
Okay, thank you. I thought it was someone moving into a house and occupying it. So this is for work being done at a home location.
Yeah, and that's certainly
Okay.
a possibility, Alder, but I think most of the time it's someone who's already in their existing home and they're wanting to operate a business out of their current home.
Got it. Thank you for the explanation.
Any other discussion amongst the commission or questions for Mr. Stickschulte? Go ahead, Commissioner. And I did see Commissioner Bremer has now arrived for the record.
And my apologies for being late. I've been with you since 6:05.
Commissioner Ravinsky, did you have something?
Yes, I just wanted to mention, I will be recusing myself from voting on this item or discussing it, as these fees are directly impact the organization I work for.
Okay. Was there any further questions for Neil? Otherwise, it says consideration with possible action to update. So what, I mean, at this point, what is the staff recommendation?
We would ask for a motion to approve the recommended fees and forward them to council.
Motion to approve the recommended fees and forward to council.
Second.
All right, so we've got a motion by Vice Chair Miller and a second by Commissioner Paradic. Any further discussion? All right, hearing none, we'll go ahead with a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And one recusal. And then when is the next city council meeting?
That will be on the 20th.
The 20th, okay. All right, September 20th. Perfect, thank you so much.
Thank
And
you,
then
commissioners.
And then moving on to item number 2, which is a public hearing. This public hearing has been properly posted and public notification has been published in the Press Times. The Plan Commission is interested in hearing public comments on the subject agenda items. We invite your comments and ask that after your name has been called, you state your address, whether you represent a group or association, whether you favor, oppose, or are only providing information in this matter, and your comments or concerns. We also ask that you confine your testimony to facts related to the proposal at hand and avoid repetitive testimony. Questions may be asked during the public hearing, but will not be answered until the upcoming actionable item. You must be recognized by the Plan Commission in order to speak, and please address your comments to the chair. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes. To speak during this public hearing, you may unmute yourself at the bottom of the screen, use the raise hand function on Zoom, physically raise your hand if you are using the video feature, or press *6 to unmute yourself if you are calling in. So we will now open the public hearing on item number 2, public hearing on request to rezone the eastern portions of parcels 21-126-7-1, -21-127-3, and 21-127-9, located at 919 to 1001 Auto Plaza Drive from R1 Low Density Residential District and C1 General Commercial to C2 Highway Commercial, submitted by Dan Manglis, Gandrud Ivan Chevrolet Inc. owner. All right, and with the public, and then if staff could give us a brief overview.
Certainly. Thank you, Madam Chair. So as we're seeing right here, the property is located near East Town Mall. It's actually 3 parcels that are owned by Gandrud. For the sake of this public hearing, this is for a rezone that we will be considering here. The majority of the site itself is C2, but you'll note over on the eastern part of the properties, there is some C1, that's the red that's not hatched right here, and some R1 on all 3 properties. The request is to have this change all 3 parcels into C2. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And then with this public hearing, we're looking to hear from anyone who's in favor, in opposition, or would like to provide comments only. You can just unmute yourself and state your name and address for the record. Is there anyone wishing to speak?
Madam
Hi,
Chair,
this is
Lori Frederick
Mike.
has her hand raised.
Hi.
If state your
Mike
name and address.
Frederick, 2402 Rough Court. I'm just wondering how the 25-foot difference going from R1 to commercial highway, it just seems like there needs to be more of a buffer there than 25 feet. So my concerns are that it just seems way too close to change everything from either R1 and C1 to all commercial highway C2.
And I'm sorry, I missed your name.
Mike Frederick.
Mike Frederick. Okay, thank you. Was there any other concerns or comments that you wanted to address, Mike?
No, that would be it.
Okay, thank you so much for your testimony.
Thanks.
Is there anyone else wishing to speak on this item? Just state your name and address for the record, please.
Cassie DeShadow. I'm the property 2387 Van Beek Road. And I guess when I was looking up the parcel data, all 3 parcels, according to the government website, were actually zoned as R1. So I was really confused as to how they were zoned as C1. I do support the changing of whatever would be necessary, I guess, to get them the proper zoning. I guess I was just kind of confused with why the sites, the government site, the GIS mapping site versus them saying that it was C1. Otherwise, I do support the change, and also was inquiring on how this would affect local residential property values, and if Gandrud was going to be expanding further into the undeveloped area. So those were my comments and concerns.
Okay. Thank you so much for your testimony. Is there anyone else wishing to speak on this item?
So I'm with Lori Frederick. I live next door. My name is Brittany Rinke at 2400 Rough Court. just kind of providing some information. So obviously my parents are at 2402. I've lived here since I was 4 years old. We used to go sledding down that back hill. They just took down a ton of trees. So we've been seeing a lot more wildlife in our neighborhoods, which is kind of a nuisance. Been seeing a lot more mice up in our yard. It was about 3 weeks ago that they started tearing down all of those trees. It was a pretty bare field when I was 4. I'm 33 now. And I think the major destruction of the wildlife is a little bit of a concern, which I guess that's already done back there and not a whole lot we can do about it. I don't know how much everybody else here is aware of what they're planning to do there, but we've been getting information about basically clearing that out and putting a 57,000 square foot building almost directly up against our back lot line. If you are familiar with Grouse Court, Rough Court, and Heather Court, it's kind of like a little outskirts of town, dead end road that's really peaceful. It's what brought my parents here when I was 4 years old because it was a nice little secluded area. And I guess just to kind of go on top of my dad's comment about the highway C1 being so close, I have a 4-year-old and a 3-year-old, and I like having a safe neighborhood for them to play in. I know they had talked about putting up a large fence, but when you destroy all of that, you know, wildlife back there, it brings in more people. And depending on how they're planning on doing that and whatnot, I'm struggling with it because it's what brought my husband and I here 2.5 years ago, almost 3 years ago as well. We have concerns about, currently our yard is fenced in, but that fence is going to go directly up against our fence. So if our kids throw a ball over there, how do we go and retrieve that? If, you know, right now there's that big buffer, and I just feel really safe as it is right now. So as Cassie mentioned, wondering what it'll do to property values. Right now I have kind of a little sanctuary of woods back there and not a whole lot of buildings, and I'll be looking at a very large, very tall building directly in my backyard. Same with the Johnsons and the Fredericks and the Morgans and the other young couple that has a very small child right now too. They have a little kiddo that's just under a year old. So there's quite a few people that it's directly impacting, you know, on that lot line, but then too, within that further radius, if our property values decrease, it's gonna trickle down. And my mom would also like to make a comment. We're all on the same.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you so much for your concerns, Brittany. And I guess if you could have your mom state her name and address for the record, that would be great.
Yep. Lori Frederick, 2402 Rough Court. We've lived here 29 years, as Brittany had mentioned. Right now, when I sit on my back deck, I see trees, I see beautiful stuff. Yes, it's getting cleared out. We have been maintaining this hill forever, and I know Dan mentioned to me somebody's got a fence on my property. However, we've been mowing the lawn for 29 years. It's been there, and we've been very secluded there. And now, I guess it's what 15 to 20 feet is going to be that large building. And that's what I'm going to be looking at, sitting on my peaceful. I mean, I'd like Dan to come and sit on my deck and take a look at what I look at now and what I'm going to be looking at. I don't know why that residential has to be turned into a commercial. Just leave it as it is and put a commercial building a little further over. You know, because I think it is going to bring our property value down. I've lived here a long time, and I guess it just very much concerns me about all of the neighbors here. Rough Court, Grouse Court, and Heather Court. That's it.
Okay, thank you so much for your concerns, Lori. Is there anyone else wishing to speak on this item?
Hi, my name's Catherine Johnson. I live at 2406 Rough Court. I live next door to the Fredericks, actually in the same court as the Reinkes as well. And I would say at least from the two people I know on this phone call, myself and the Fredericks are both directly impacted the most in regards to what would be perceived as view or property value from the map that the last person showed. My house was the farthest rightmost green star there. My house was right behind it, right there over on the R1 that they're considering changing to the C1. And I have a really long fence in my backyard. And when people would come over to my house in the past, we have a nice deck back there. And in the summer, it just filled up entirely with green trees and foliage and was super beautiful. And you would see the sunset through the trees. And people would always say, what's even back there? Is that just a huge like forest? Is that just a big woods? And then everyone would be really surprised. And I'd say, oh no, it's actually Gandrud Auto, you know, a little bit back there, but you couldn't see it in the least bit. In the last 2 weeks, the trees have been almost entirely cut down. And now I see all of Gandrud Auto in my backyard. I can see all the lights, the hundreds of cars that are back there. The noise and the wind is insane. My backyard never used to be windy, and I spend a lot of time back there gardening and with my 2 young children. We're also foster parents, so we have other kids in and out, but 2 that live here permanently. And it just entirely changed the view that we had. And I said to my husband, I was just so disappointed. We've lived here 4 years. It's somewhere that we've always wanted to stay. And I had always planned on living here through the time that my children graduated high school. And when I came home the day, I work at Preble High School, when I came home the day that they had cut down all the trees down, this might sound too dramatic to some, but I'm a nature person, and I just cried. Because it changed so much of the home that I loved. And I recognize, and I hope you guys understand too, that even though that's not my property, ask anybody who buys a house in the mountains if they own the mountain, and they don't, but they love to look at it every morning. Or somebody who lives in LA likes to look at the beautiful scenery. They don't own the strip, but it's something that they enjoy. And one of the main reasons my husband and I moved onto this property was because of the beautiful foliage in the backyard, not having those backyard neighbors. And now it's being entirely redeveloped back there. I understand now at this point that the trees are gone, the foliage is gone, but my question is, what's going to happen to my property value, and how can I protect my assets? So the next question with that is going to look like, how is this company going to do something for me in the process? How are they going to benefit me as the person who's living here? What type of fence is going to be put up? What is the height going to be? What is the distance going to be from my property, so that I can still feel like my home is my home, so that somebody who cares about this property in this neighborhood can stay here and enjoy the place that I've made my house into a home, and that the integrity of the land can be maintained. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your concerns on that. Is there anyone else looking to speak on this item? Is there anyone else wishing to speak? Is there anyone wishing to speak? Let the record reflect that no one came forward, and this public hearing is now closed. Moving on to the corresponding actionable item, item number 3, consideration with possible action on request to rezone the eastern portion of parcels 21-126-7-1, 21-127-3, 21-127-9, located at 919 to 1001 Auto Plaza Drive, from R1 Low Density Residential District and C1 General Commercial to C2 Highway Commercial, submitted by Dan Manglis, Gandrud Ivan Chevrolet Inc. owner.
So thank you again. So to get more into details of what the request is, this goes back to 3 parcels that are being requested to be rezoned. A lot of the neighbors who have spoken here are over in this area, And this is a 400-foot notification area that letters were sent out to. Right here is the future land use. So you'll note that all 3 parcels are commercial. So it does meet what comp plans have shown for the area, whereas the folks off to the east there are in low density residential. The question at hand right here would be then the rezoning of all the lots to go ahead and be under one banner. So the larger parcel right here would change from being a combination of C1, sorry, excuse me, C2 and R1, as well as the southern parcel. The eastern parcel would change from being C1 and R1. This right here is an overview of the overall site, and you can see more of the Gandry properties off to the west, Conservancy to the south, residential neighborhoods off to the east, and East Town Mall off to the north. The area in question is this eastern portion. These are the trees that are being referred to by members of the public, and this is the area in question for rezoning. Now, where we got here from what was in the past is these 3 parcels, typically when we want to go ahead and see as staff, we want to see parcels be one zoning to not have this issue right here. Now, in the past, we're seeing a product what would be called perhaps split or spite zoning. You notice the R1 that occurs right here, that when these plans originally came out as far as mapping goes, you would the inclusion of an R1 strip of land would be in, because if you just take the C2 standards as far as setbacks go, those parcels or those developments would get awfully close as far as potential physical development up against the R1. Now, what has changed here in the recent past is the addition of buffer design into the code itself. With that in mind, you notice on what was submitted for, I want to stress, a conceptual site plan by Gandry. We're not debating here tonight a site plan. We're discussing a rezone of the property. But as a reference, this has been put forward by Gandry out to the community. And this is the idea of what they'd be trying to go ahead and do back in that existing grassy area. So with any new plans that would come in with a C2 or a commercial use like this up against residential, there's a requirement to go ahead and have a 25-foot buffer. You'll note on these conceptual plans that Gandry put forth 25 feet here. Within that buffer itself, there would need to be levels of opaque quality to go ahead and block off lighting from the existing property. In general, that means having opaque levels of at least 90% that would go ahead and between 4 and 6 feet on the property, and the development would have to be at least 25 feet off the property lines. So with this in mind, as a staff, we do not like seeing properties have different types of zoning because of situations like this. Referring back to the comp plan, this is commercial, and with that in mind, we do feel it is appropriate for a recommendation of approval for the C1, C2, and R1 to be fully C2. Thank you.
Thank you so much, John. Is there discussion amongst the commission or questions for staff? Go ahead, Commissioner Bremer.
I think my first question would be why you landed on C2 rather than C1.
Right, so the petitioners brought this forward as far as uses to the rest of the property, which the majority of the property itself is C2. Automobile sales are C2, they're not C1. So this new addition would be a component of their auto sales. And with that in mind, it would need to be C2.
Okay, I get that. What kind of buffering might the neighbors expect to see at least 25 feet away from the property lines?
Right, so I'll go off with the code states exactly. So buffer areas shall contain either a masonry wall, fence, berm, or hedge, or a combination that forms a screen, a minimum of 4 feet in height, a maximum of 6 feet in height, not less than 90% opaque on a year-round basis. Screening located along the front and corner yards are limited to 4 feet in height and not less than 90% opaque on a year-round basis, which is effectively blocks automobile headlights from trespass on adjacent property. Buffers shall be landscaped with at least 1 tree and 5 shrubs for every 50 linear feet, and buffers may be interrupted for necessary pedestrian and vehicle access. With this in mind too, the max height for this area for a fence, which Gandred has discussed at the neighborhood meeting of putting up, would be 8 feet for a fence.
Thank you. I realize you're repeating much of what you said before, but I'm readier to take it in now, and I appreciate that, John. Thank you.
No problem.
My other question will go to the Gandred folks themselves.
Is it possible for me to ask a question on that?
Right now, the floor is closed.
Okay, thank you.
So were there any other comments amongst the commission, questions for staff? I know that one of the people speaking at the public hearing had talked about asking about why it was R1, and I think John showed us, it's that spot buffering that they used to do. I think that's why it showed up as R1 for all of that.
Yeah. Question
Go ahead.
on the proposed development plan, has there been any discussion of moving the building away since the public meeting in August, or is it more or less going to be where it's presented to date, or do we not know?
So right now, we aren't considered an actual site plan itself. It was conceptual. I do want to note for the record here, we have received as staff some calls in from the public. Most of it was just informational questions. We did get one from Matt Hayroth over at 2411 Grouse, who was neither in support or in denial of it, but did question the potential area for the loading dock. And he understands this is not part of the zoning, but just noting it to the folks over at Gandred. But we haven't heard anything back from Gandred as to any new area for conceptual loading areas.
Go ahead, Commissioner Daniels.
Thank you, Chair. Quick question, John. So this vote is for the zoning. Once the actual plans come through, will that then come back to the commission to be voted on? Or once we approve, if we approve the C2, the plans, they can do whatever? I think it comes back to the planning commission again, wouldn't it?
But no, it would not.
Conditionally not.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is just for a rezone itself. So with that in mind, that area could be used for what C2 purposes would be in the back of the property. Now, C2 goes for auto use, so they'd have to go ahead and meet the standards and conditions of C2 zoning, and then the standards that apply to buffering between commercial and residential.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, just in line with buffering, can we add anything in here to make a larger buffer?
So this is not a conditional use permit right here. This is a rezone itself that's going on to C2. So the part of the reason why staff was in favor of the recommendation is because of the updated language for buffering that is taking the space of spite zoning that was in effect before. But this is to go ahead and rezone the property itself.
And I appreciate, because I know all the neighbors are here and they're concerned about the site plan and what it's actually going to be. But what we're concerned with right now is that the zoning of it and cleaning up the zoning, because some of those parcels have 3 different zonings on, or at least 2. So what we're focused on at this point is that zoning. As a site plan, none of that is what we're looking at this point. Go ahead, Commissioner Bremer.
2 other questions to John. First of all, because we're talking about a shift to C3 for the whole slice of what was once called spite zoning, which seems to be a real put-down term. Is there any difference? Does that have any impact on the amount of buffering that can be required? I think not.
No, from just interpretations of the past, it was just put in there to go ahead and note a buffer would be necessary. You do
Okay.
see these happening in different districts to go ahead and separate what is clearly a residential area, like is established to the east, and future development for commercial, like you have to the west.
But how many situations do we have that involve C2 bumping up against residential as opposed to C1 bumping up against residential?
That's a good question. I don't know that top of mind. how
Isn't
much-
that what we have on Ashland Avenue, right by that little Caesars that we approved? We had that spot zoning there, and so that's a place where I think that it's C2 and it goes to right to R1 right there. And it used to have some spot zoning, but we cleaned that up.
Yeah, and if I recall, that was also for that similar purpose right there of what was happening to go ahead and separate the neighbors to the west there to the commercial to the east over at that location.
And then my final question is, was there any regulation that Gandrud violated by going ahead with taking the trees down in preparation for what had not yet been okayed?
Right. No, not that I'm aware of.
It was a very unneighborly thing to do and horrendously disappointing to me, and I think really undercut the case they're trying to make here. That's all I have to say at this point.
I want to piggyback off of Sid's comments there. Just looking at the setbacks for all the commercial districts, they just don't seem to have in mind bumping up to a residential district. I mean, normally we don't see C2 against an R1 or any residential for that matter. So while I do appreciate the buffering that's been built into a lot of this, it just doesn't seem like that's what was in mind when this was put together. So I'm feeling pretty uncomfortable about this based on, the fact that the maximum height is 35 feet. Not that that's what they're going to put, but zoning would allow it. The side setbacks, 6 feet. I mean, you can do a lot with buffering, but if they actually follow through with any of that size of the structure at that height, at that setback, that's an imposing structure against the residential neighborhood. Plain and simple. We can argue up and down how good the buffer can do, but that's a big change, especially compared to his woods before.
I would like to move to open the floor since I'm hoping that there are some representatives from Gandrud who are here to speak.
I would second.
I'm sorry, we got a motion by Commissioner Bremer and I missed the second. Oh, Commissioner Ravinsky. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, so the floor is now open and Commissioner Bremer, you would like to speak with the applicant?
Yes. And in particular, I want to ask about, in particular, I'd like to know if they have any excuse for going ahead with cutting down the trees in such a brutal fashion. But I think we need to recognize whoever is here from Gandrud.
I was gonna say, I'm not sure I see.
This
yeah.
is Jim Tice. We're the general contractor working with Gandrud.
If you could state your address for the record too, please.
5034 Frontier Road, Denmark.
Were there specific questions that you had for him, Commissioner Bremer?
Well, yes, my first question is about the decision to go ahead with cutting down the trees before there was an okay for their eventual reason for doing so.
We were not involved in that, anything with the tree cutting. However, we do need to get in there, do some soil testing as well as some civil engineering for site work. So clearing the site is, nothing against code or any regulations to clear the site, but we needed to open up that site to do more field investigation.
And Madam Chair, I see another gentleman named Kevin who's willing to speak. I take it as also as a Gandrid representative or a representative of the applicant.
That is correct.
If you could just state your name and address for the record, please.
Hi, Kevin Pavanka, 433 Hoganwood Circle, Sobieski, Wisconsin. As far as the trees and buffer go as well too, we had a lot of issues with like we had a couple of homeless incidences where we had to have the police called, and there was like homeless camps that were into that wooded buffer area. Part of this cleaning that up was to just be able for us to go through there, maintain it, mow it, keep everything cleaned up. Also monitor human foot traffic through as well. Just insurance liability standpoint, besides we don't want to have it where, you know, it could be a spot where you really can't control people sneaking in and out of your property.
Thank you. I appreciate that concern. I do have another question. May I go ahead, Madam Chair? As one of our neighbors suggested, I'm wondering, have you considered the possibility of moving your building further to the west to open up the space and maybe extend the buffering area between that very, very large 57,000 square foot building and the neighbors?
Yeah, and John, I don't know, are you able to pull that site plan up, that overhead view again? So one of the key components is between the residential chunk and the commercial chunk of our land, there is a pretty nasty berm height drop. So from the land height where all the homes are at to the height where like our buildings are at are about a 10 to 15 foot drop across that whole property line. So one of the things we have to look at too is how we can, you know, between the fencing, a tree buffer, any kind of stormwater, if we have to have any kind of a ditch or ravine tied there, all that stuff is going to determine how far east to west or how close to our current building or how close to that residential area that whole building can be designed and added up and built to. As we were discussing, this would be like a worst case scenario at this point. Like I said, it may have to go west just because of landscape variations there as well too, just because of how steep that embankment cuts from that residential area down to our commercial area.
Is there any reason you would not want it further west?
Not necessarily that I would know. Like I said, I know this was kind of as a worst case scenario, we didn't want to have a drawing put out with a 100-foot buffer and then have the building end up at 90 feet and then, you know, have it where, you know, you didn't hold up your part of it. So like I said, this would be an absolute, as far close as we could possibly put it. And like I said, from there, between stormwater retention, you know, a wooded tree buffer that we would be putting in, fencing that we would be putting in, a lot of that will determine on where it actually ends up. And then as far as the loading docks headed to the north there, that also kind of determines where that will end up side to side as well, because there are some utilities, some power, water as well in that hillside that'll kind of determine where. So like John kind of brought this up before as well too. And I know you guys are looking at it as, you know, are you approving the building or not? This is going to be a worst case scenario in the neighborhood eyes. Where it ends up, how we would work it from there, if it has to be 50 feet off, 100 feet off due to terrain challenges. Like I said, a lot of that stuff we can't really even look at this point because it's residential at that point. We can't have like Jim, our builders, come in and say, you know, where's this going to end up? Where are we going to put the fence? Because we're still kind of tied on our hands of how, depending on how the zoning looks, makes it how everything else turns out. The fencing that we would put up, the berm we would put in, any kind of tree buffers, a lot of that stuff will determine, you know, obviously we're not trying to piss off any neighbors here by putting a huge building in their backyard. I know originally back in about 96, this all was owned by Gander Chevrolet, and it was actually sold to the mall for that whole area to become a parking lot for the East Town Mall movie theater. Just with demand and everything, that never really worked out for the East Town Mall to spend enough money to develop that. So it was it's been sitting idle just because it was land designed to go to East Town Mall for that parking lot, sold by Ivan Gander to the Mall Association. Now we had the opportunity to buy it back, and it kind of expanded our operations a little bit into it.
Are you open to moving the building further than your worst case scenario that you're showing us here? And I do appreciate the honesty of showing that.
Yeah, that would be a question directly for Dan, our owner. Unfortunately, he was not able to make it tonight to the meeting. But like I said, I know it was put this way just to be like, as I said, kind of a maximum without our allowance. So
thank you very much.
We are still in open, so if
Yeah.
anybody else did want to bring any comments forward, now would be that time from the
Thank you,
public. That is.
Miller. Yeah, if there's anyone else wishing to speak on this item. Otherwise, do we have any more questions for the applicant? I'd entertain a motion to close the floor then.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Vice Chair Miller, second by Commissioner Bremer. All those in favor to close the floor?
Aye.
Aye.
So I know that this is what we're trying to do is cleaning up the zoning and trying to fit the master plan. I think what our concern is that going to a C2 zoning, is that going to be enough of a buffer for the neighbors?
And I'm appreciating that the Gandrid folks have given us a view of what the worst possible situation would be. Unfortunately, that's exactly what zoning permits, that they could do the worst possible zoning. And if you were trying not to infuriate your neighbors, I think you did a rather bad job by taking the trees down right away, because that also gave them a view of what that's going to involve. I'm not seeing any way that I can in conscience vote for this. So I'm eager to hear from other members of the commission.
I'll play a little devil's advocate with you, Sid.
Thanks.
Moving it to C2 and letting them proceed with the development would allow or would force them to put that buffer in, which would give back some semblance of a barrier buffer between there compared to an empty field now. So it would force their hand on that regard versus at this point now they can just keep it an empty field. As if you can see right now, the code allows them to do that. This at least puts some teeth to giving a barrier, a buffer there.
The 25-foot buffer that has to be there, or the setback plus the buffer that John so fully described. Thank you.
I think if this was if this was a CUP, what we would do is we'd make sure there's a buffer there. We would include those conditions. So I think it really just comes down to, are we comfortable with what John stated in terms of what that buffer will be? If we're comfortable with what that is and we agree with it, then I think we should move it forward. If we're not, then we've got a problem with the code that we should probably address.
So I mean, besides, okay, so the staff's recommendation is approval of the request to change to C2.
To align with majority of the other property currently.
Correct, to clean up the zoning on those 3 properties. Because each property had at least 2 zonings on them already. And that was old, that spot zoning was something that used to be done and is not done now because we built that. I mean, realistically, that spot zoning isn't done now because we have that buffer built into the code. So really it's trading one buffer for another. And I 100% appreciate how the neighbors feel about losing that view, because I know that I would be incredibly disappointed if that had happened to me as well. So, but we're trading, I mean, the trees are gone at this point. We're trading one buffer for another, and we're cleaning up zoning.
And again, I also appreciate, as I echo Commissioner Brimmer saying that the worst case scenario was presented. So I do also appreciate that. Again, not being very familiar with that area, I think one of the speakers talked about the decline or the hill, and I think even someone from the community talked about the hill, going sledding on the hill, and how it's such of a deep decline, so that the height of the building might not be as noticeable with that. And I also understand that Gandrew is basically saying that they really don't want to be bad neighbors. There's a lot of land there for them to move that building, but that is the worst case scenario. I also understand that there was some type of homeless encampment there that maybe the neighbors did not have exposure to. Now with the trees gone, unfortunately, that they would have exposure to, they would see that. I also love that we're cleaning up the zoning. And I guess my intention and my hope would be that from all the information that's shared here, the Gandrew representatives would take that back when they're getting their site plans done, even though this is not it's a rezoning, so they wouldn't have to come back to us, that they would take all this information into heart when they're actually doing their planning and they're looking at their buffering. Again, it's different because it's not a conditional use, it's a rezoning, which is we get more conditional use when we do the whole rezoning. So I guess I have a lot of questions on both sides. But I do like that we're cleaning it up to align with the rest of the property.
Yeah. Well, and kind of going off of what you just said, Commissioner Daniels, so they said that there's that hill and the berm, and then they would put a fence on that berm, that, that's possible that, that it's such a height that they wouldn't see that in that building. Go ahead, Commissioner Ravinsky, did you have something?
Yeah, I was just gonna, so we are correcting the zoning over there, but is it the appropriate zoning for right up against an R1? That would be my question. You would normally have other property buffering between a C2 and an R1. So it doesn't feel appropriate to have the C2 right up against the R1, even if it is cleaning up the zoning. Now, from the sounds of it, this project wouldn't be dead in the water if we don't approve this, because there is the other means of getting a CUP if they wanted, and then we could put those conditions on it. If I'm hearing that correctly, that's what that would sound like. just, so we're not, the project wouldn't be done if we don't pass the zoning here. There would be other ways of doing that.
I would note that C1 and R1 do not allow for auto sales, and there is no conditional use to it. It's C2 is where auto sales come into play, which is what the majority of the property is.
Yeah, and I was just going to add real quick. The staff, I'm pretty sure, looked at all of these questions that we are already asking here, and I guess so. John and maybe staff, everything that you guys looked into was the rezoning of the property, and I guess I know that's what we're coming to. What staff lean toward approval of this ask?
Right. So we look back into the multiple zoning on a property, which in general is not a practice that we'd want to do nowadays, and wouldn't happen with an updated code unless there was a dramatic change in, say, the topography of the site. Say you happen to have a giant hill that went down to a ravine and you couldn't actually physically access parts of the site. This isn't the case right here. So we look back into what happened in the past with the split zoning, however you want to go ahead and determine it, and what the intent of what that was. The intent was to put in a buffer between the properties. But as was mentioned by Jake, if you just take the code alone for C2 zoning, the setback is 6 feet right there. And that would be, in our opinion, far too close to go ahead and put development up along the existing residential right there. But what comes into play and supersedes that then is in the design standards for landscaping, that's where a 25-foot landscape buffer has to be into play, and thus the building can't be in that buffer, effectively making a 25-foot building setback. And there's your updated split zoning on the property. So it's to go ahead and keep the one zone, because clearly with that being a different parcel right there, that's not intended to go ahead and be a single family house right there. That's not the case in those areas. No, there's no frontage. This is meant to go ahead and be with the property that is attached to.
John, how wide is that R1 area currently in place that we are cleaning up?
Right.
It's more than 25 feet, isn't it?
It sure is. Yes. I don't know what the intent was per se that back then, or we're looking at maps that just show lines. We don't know what exactly where it was.
Right.
Because it wasn't a legal description that said this part will be exactly this many feet. You can tell by the intent a buffer is necessary right there, but how much? I don't know the exact answer to that. But yes, if you look at the maps themselves, it's more than 25 feet. Yeah.
Would you like to take a guesstimate?
Between 50 and 100 feet.
Thank you.
Sid, are you talking about how much the buffer is, or how much where the old zoning, where the R1 is? Because I counted 100 feet in the building and then 25 foot for the buffer. So about 125 feet is what I gathered based on the maps, but maybe I'm wrong.
That is what I'm talking about, though. Yes.
I was looking
yellow
specifically
space.
at the map with the building on it, and I could see how much of the building, because the building is 200 feet across at the bottom. Well,
Good point. And it's basically half of that building plus the 25 feet.
so that was my little math, my half of a building, 100 feet, and then 25-foot buffer.
Thank you. That's a substantial change in the buffering, even though it is a different kind of buffering that would be put in place.
I do want to note, we don't know what they were thinking back when this happened, when they put that in. But if you happen to have put in, say, let's just say a 10-foot wide split zone, you would not notice it on maps. So you go ahead and note, hey, folks, a buffer needs to be in place right here. But that said, yeah, you're right. It probably is upwards of 100 feet or so in the buffering on the map itself, showing the different R1 compared to C1 and C2.
It does look like a substantial change then to the buffer of what we're talking about. I know we're talking for a buffer to a buffer, but it's a substantially smaller buffer is what we'd be if the zoning was to change. It is unfortunate that it is close to that residential area. I agree with the other comments that have been said. Just to clarify something that was mentioned in the very beginning, this is fairly rare that an R2 would be that close to a residential area. Is that correct? I think there was only one other potential example. A C2, excuse me. Yep.
That was the only one that I knew off the top of my head. I'm sure that there are probably others, but if they're uncommon.
I've been scanning the zoning map while we've been talking here. There's actually a fair amount of them on the west side, near Mason Military, Southwest High.
Oh,
some on
Jake,
L2.
we're
So
losing your
I wouldn't say
word.
it's uncommon. There are occur. Sorry. Is that any better now, Sid?
Yeah, a
Any
little
better?
bit.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry, I was just pointing out there are a number of cases on the west side where we do have C2 bumped up against R1. Usually it's stepped down with an R3 in the middle in a lot of places, but there are cases of it on the west side.
So I feel like we're not comfortable changing this to C2, going down from a 125 possible kind of 125 foot buffer to 25 foot.
I would say I'm on the fence, to be honest with you. It does feel like the right move. We do want to clean up zoning. This does give us an ability to enforce a buffer, which we do not currently. Keep in mind, if we do not do this, they have no reason to put in a buffer. The buffer is that residential strip of residential zoning that they're just going to mow.
Right.
This at least gives us an opportunity to make them do something to provide the buffer versus an empty field of grass.
And your use of the word fence is appropriate here because we are also talking about vertical buffer as well as the horizontal space.
John, is water a concern on the site? I know it's not in the floodplain, but is water a concern? I assume there'll be retention ponds, things like that.
Yeah, preliminarily speaking, no, it's not. And on their concept, they do show some stormwater south of the proposed build.
Yeah, I will just say, I have faith in staff, that staff looked through all of this before they made their determination. So that's just myself. I would think that staff would have, if there were issues that they didn't think they could overcome, they would have brought that up in their recommendations. That's just where I'm leaning.
But to add to that, DJ, there is site plan review in between here and there too. So if there's something egregious, staff would have the ability to account for it in site plan review.
Madam Chair, you might want to explain to the audience why we aren't calling on anybody more from the audience.
Yeah, the floor is closed at this time, so we're not taking any more comments or questions from the public.
I do think we need to move forward one way or another here. I'll put a motion forward to approve via staff's recommendation with the strong nudging of site plan review to be gone over the fine tooth comb.
And I second that.
Okay, so we have a motion by Vice Chair Miller and a second by Commissioner Daniels to approve the request. Is there any further discussion?
I'm sure.
Yes, go ahead.
If we can just clarify with John, that there's no other possible way to form a buffer in this scenario? To his
Right.
knowledge?
Yeah, so it's a rezone request. And with that request, we are going with what the code states for C2 and staff based off of what the majority of the property is. And because of the buffer language that exists, that was put in years ago as far as stating 25 feet. When it comes to a use, it's commercial up against residential. And so not for rezone requests, it has to stay the way that it is. Because we're not looking through this the lens of a CUP or a PUD. This is a straightforward rezone to which the property owner could go ahead and do a design that meets the use and the development standards of C2 zoning. It doesn't have to be this that was put forward. It's merely conceptual at this point. So if this were to be approved by Common Council, any C2 zoning would have to meet those requirements when a full-on site plan review were performed by community and economic development staff at that time.
Okay, so we have a motion by Vice Chair Miller, a second by Commissioner Daniels to approve the request according to staff. I will go ahead and do an individual vote on this one because I feel like we're a little bit mixed. Vice Chair Miller,
Aye.
Alder Hutchinson,
Aye.
Commissioner Bremer.
I have to say, vote no, and it's because taking down the trees really ruins the area. And I just cannot support that kind of treatment.
Commissioner Daniels,
Aye.
Commissioner Ravinsky,
Aye.
and Commissioner Pradeck.
No.
And
Mhm,
this is gonna be a problem because I'm voting in favor.
mhm.
That's 3 versus 3. So what happens in that situation?
It dies, doesn't it?
So we have to
Motion.
vote again. We need a new motion, right?
Correct.
Wait, what was the vote?
3 to 3.
It should be 4-3, one way or 3-4.
No,
Didn't,
we only got 6, don't we?
we have 6 of us,
We don't have 7. We should have 7, we don't.
right? We're short one. That's why we have a tie vote right now.
Oh, I
But-
see. So you're
Oh.
voting no? I mean, Madam Chair?
Yeah, I'm voting yay.
Oh. Well,
I'm
then
voting
it's
yay.
four to-
Members now.
Yay. Alder Hutchinson is yay. Commissioner Bremer is nay.
Mhm.
Commissioner Daniels is yay. Commissioner Ravinsky is nay. And Commissioner Pradeck is nay. Correct? Okay.
And what about your
And-
vote, Lisa?
My vote is affirmative, yes.
Okay, then
And
it would be a
doesn't-
4-3 in favor.
Because
No, because
Alder
it's
Hutchin
always
also
right.
has Alder
right.
Hutchin also has his vote.
Simple math, apparently. I'm sorry. I apologize. I was doing tick marks over our names and I missed my own. Okay, so you're right. It is 4-3. Because I am voting yay. Vice Chair
Mhm.
Miller is yay, Alder Hutchinson is yay, and Commissioner Daniels is yay.
Correct.
Okay, so then this will move forward then to the September 20th meeting of the Common Council. My apologies in the miscount on the votes.
Lisa, before we move on, make sure that, just to let the public know, that council meeting is where you can make your voice heard as well. This is not the last chance. You can go to that council meeting to make your opinions heard.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Vice Chair Miller. All right, and then moving on to item number 4, which is public hearing on request to authorize a conditional use permit for a single-family dwelling in an office residential district at 1308 East Walnut Street, submitted by Cheryl Schmidt, Freedom Enterprises applicant, Green Bay Redevelopment Authority owner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To give a brief background on this, this is at the corner of South Irwin and East Walnut, southeast corner. asking for a CUP to build a single-family home on the property itself. With the CUP in this district itself, it is zoned OR. It is a conditional use permit for this parcel. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, John. So with the public hearing, we're looking to hear from people who are in favor, in opposition, or looking to provide information only. Is there anyone wishing to speak? Is there anyone wishing to speak? Is there anyone wishing to speak? Let the record reflect that no one came forward, and this public hearing is now closed. Moving on to the corresponding actionable item, item number 5, consideration with possible action on request to authorize a conditional use permit for a single-family dwelling in an office residential district at 1308 East Walnut Street, submitted by Cheryl Schmidt of Freedom Enterprises applicant, Green Bay Redevelopment Authority owner.
Again, so to get more into the details on this, you may be familiar with this property. This was before us in August, but was pulled by a potential developer. And now a new one has come in looking to redevelop the property. In both cases, the ask was to go ahead and put up a single family home on the property itself. As noted in the future land use and comp plan, the area is low density residential. But the issue before us here is that the property is owned office residential, and with that comes a conditional use permit that is required for development of that type on the site. So Cheryl Schmidt has come forward looking to place a home on the corner. You're seeing a concept of what would happen, Walnut being right here and Irwin being off on the upper part of the screen. The home would face to Walnut, and there'd be a detached garage in the back. The request here is to go ahead and move an existing home, which is over on Chicago Street right now. This home and the detached garage are requested to go ahead and move to the site. The site is owned by the RDA right now, and this item is going forward to the RDA tomorrow to come to an agreement between RDA and Schmidt on the property. When looking in mind to the rest of the neighborhood, there's a larger parcel that can fit well with the house of this size. It's a 2-story house, which is pretty evidence on both Walnut and Irwin in the area. The site was marketed as a single family property by the RDA. And so with that, staff does recommend approval of the CUP subject to the approval of the sale by RDA in their terms with Schmidt and compliant to all the regulations in the code itself. Thanks.
Okay, thank you so much, John. Any discussion among the commission?
I'd make a motion to approve.
I'll second that.
A motion by Commissioner Ravinsky and a second by Commissioner Bremer. Any further discussion? Okay, hearing none, we'll go ahead with the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, and we'll move forward unanimously to Common Council for September 20th. All right, and moving on to item number 6. Public hearing on request to rezone 2560 University Avenue from Neighborhood Commercial District to General Commercial District, submitted by Brad Reimer, Mao and Associates petitioner on behalf of 30 KFT LLC property owner.
All right, so I can give a little bit of background information on this. This is located on the east side, and the intent is to rezone from neighborhood commercial to general commercial, and this would allow Gentle Vet to expand. They are currently at 1476 University, and they would like to put in an expansion that would not fit the floor area ratio. So this is this comes down to the building footprint, the setbacks, and the zoning district. And neighborhood commercial currently does not allow this building to expand in the way that they would like to. The future land use does call for commercial on this location, as well as this strip in general. And it is currently, as you can see, kind of this left shape. It is neighborhood commercial. These parcels were actually rezoned to neighborhood commercial during the University Avenue corridor and this was with intent to have a future development that did not come to fruition at that time. So the applicant is asking to rezone to commercial. And I believe that there are people on this call right now that are the applicant or in support or working with GentleVet.
Okay, thank you so much, Madison. All right, so then with this public hearing portion of this item, looking to hear from people who are in favor, in opposition, or just want to provide comments only. If you could just state your name and address for the record, please.
Brad Reimer, 5707 Aspen Court in Denmark. But I'm with Mao and Associates, representative for the petitioner. Just to clarify, one thing Madison was saying, it's not an expansion of the existing build. There is no building on the site. There are existing businesses down the road on University Avenue, and they're looking to build a new facility on this property. The floor area ratio just doesn't work for many buildings on this site. So that's what we're looking for the rezone for. So if anyone has any questions when it comes time for discussion, just feel free to let me know. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Was there anyone wishing to speak on this item? Is there anyone wishing to speak? Is there anyone wishing to speak? Let the record reflect that no one has come forward and this public hearing is now closed. Moving on to the actionable item, number 7, consideration with possible action on request to rezone 2560 University Avenue from Neighborhood Commercial District to the General Commercial District, submitted by Brad Reimer, Mao and Associates petitioner on behalf of 30 KFT LLC property owner.
Okay, I will share my screen again. Sorry about that. All right, as Brad said, this is actually currently an unused grass hill. There is an old single family home with trees, and the applicant has specified that there will be no trees, no existing trees coming down. And they've also outlined their stormwater management and proposed drainage system because of the hill. I just wanted to, oopsies. Here we go. I just wanted to go back to the comprehensive plan that we have listed. With this study that was done in conjunction with the plans for the old Packerland packaging site and University Heights at Baird Creek, there was plans to have a development behind. And like I said, that did not come to fruition. So the neighborhood commercial district is really to kind of have that buffer. And as you can see in the surrounding areas, you've got some R3 varied residential, but you still have that hard commercial on the corners and also on University Ave. The site plan would not fit the floor area ratio. Technically on this site, it would need to be, even if they combined the 3 neighborhood commercial parcels, it would need to be about 13 stories high. And if they kept it on this small site, potentially even 5 stories high. And GentleVet is not looking to do that. They want to expand. They have about 25 to 30 employees, and that's not even including clients. And they would like to really expand their veterinary practice and they would need to convert to a commercial one rezone to do. And it is plans for the city staff to kind of revert that back to commercial one. We'd like to also include the other 2 adjacent parcels to the west. So staff is recommending approval with the inclusion of the other 2 parcels and also a like a CSM, because I believe the applicant or the client would like to divide as well and have additional commercial uses.
Okay, thank you, Madison. So that question popped right on my head. Is there any discussion amongst the commission?
I just want to note that this is one of Dr. Gray's patients, who is a member of my household, but I trust him to give her good care regardless of what way I vote tonight. So I'm going to stay in the discussion.
So now with those other 2 adjacent properties, Madison, who owns those properties? Have the property owners been notified that they're possibly getting rezoned?
To my understanding, they have been notified and they are different owners. But right now we are just focusing on that one parcel. But staff would like to note that we would like to kind of clean up that, because having neighborhood commercial as a buffer when you're surrounded by commercial that is growing, staff feels that we should stick with the comprehensive plan.
Okay.
But they have been notified.
Okay. Was there any further discussion amongst the commission or questions for staff?
Just to clarify, our vote today is just on that one parcel rezoning, right?
Correct. To rezone, but with the condition to rezone the adjacent properties in the future.
In the future,
Yes.
but not by tonight's vote.
Okay.
Thank you for that clarification,
Okay,
Alderman
thank you.
Livingston.
Well, I would certainly entertain a motion.
I'll move to approve.
Second.
So the motion by Alder Hutchinson, a second by Commissioner Paradek. Any further discussion?
Yes, Lisa, real quick. I do have a friend that works for the applicant, so I will be recusing myself from this vote.
And I'm sorry, Commissioner Bremer, did you say you were also recusing? No.
No, I'm going to determine that my cat is not sufficient reason for me to recuse myself.
Got it. Just making sure. And Commissioner Ravinsky, did you have something?
I wanted clarification again, because the way the recommendation is worded, it says staff is recommending approval with the condition that the 2 other adjacent parcels be included in the rezone. Will those other 2 be coming back to us and this one won't go through unless those other 2 are approved?
If you move to approve this one, it would just be for this parcel. However, those other 2 will be coming back on that condition. I hope that makes sense.
I
And
can
should
expand
be
on that a
approved.
little bit further if you don't mind, Madison.
Yep.
The idea is that we didn't want just the one parcel to end up with a different zoning type, especially since NC is inappropriate for all of those parcels there. However, we didn't do the proper notification to do all of the rezonings tonight. So the idea is that if we condition the rezoning, which we don't do very often, on those 2, it wouldn't leave just one parcel getting rezoned and the other one stuck in NC in case those other owners weren't receptive or if it took a long time to do it. So the idea is to make it contingent on those other 2 being brought back for rezoning. So that way that whole strip gets it instead of just that one parcel. So it's a little rare for us to condition a rezoning. We don't do it very often, but we felt it was necessary for this one.
So again, just to clarify, if we vote yes on this, it won't happen unless those other two happen.
Yes.
Okay.
I guess with the motion on the floor, we can't really open the floor at this point, correct?
Right.
Okay. All right, so a motion by Alder Hutchinson, second by Commissioner Braddock to approve as staff has written.
Got a question?
Go ahead.
When I made the motion, I thought we were approving the one and the other two would follow. I see an encumbrance on the partitioner if we vote yes on this and then have to wait and for the other two to be approved, it may encumber them. You know what I mean? So, and I understand the staff's wanting to get the other two in, but I think it's more important listening to the discussion for the current applicant to get the approval now, and then have the other two parcels come later. So I'd like to amend my motion to approving the specific parcel in question for approval of the change in zoning with the hopeful intent the other two will follow, but not contingent upon it.
I think
I think-
procedurally, we have to take the motion as it was seconded. We can't amend it, I believe.
Well, I think we can amend it, but
We
there has to be a
Okay.
vote to approve the amendment. And then it would become the motion.
I second the amendment.
Okay, so we're rescinding our original motion and we're now amending it.
We're
And
voting
now-
on the, we were voting on the
voting on the
amendment,
Right,
Voting
and then
on
we
the
go back to
amendment,
the
right.
original
Right.
motion as amended.
okay, so we're voting on the amendment. And that was, do we have a motion and a second for the amendment?
Yeah, I motioned.
Okay, got it. Okay,
Michael.
we've got same motion and amendment. Okay, got it. First and second. So we've got the amendment on the table by Alder Hutchinson, but second by Commissioner Braddock. All those in favor of the amendment?
I,
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, so now we have,
Now I think we vote on the amendment, actually. We vote on the.
but
right, so
We
now we're
vote-
voting the
it's
motion with
the
the amendment.
original motion as amended, so,
Original motion as amended. Thank you.
right.
All right, and so we still have a first by Alder Hutchinson and a second by Commissioner Braddock on
Yeah.
that as well. Okay. All right, so with that amended motion then, all those in favor?
I,
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, and then that was with the recusal from Commissioner or Vice Chair Miller. Which is why I was watching his mouth and I didn't see his mouth move. Okay, all right. Committee, right, okay, all right. Moving on then to item number 8. Consideration with
Thank
possible
you.
action on request
Thank
to
you.
vacate streets of East Shore Drive, Calic Street, Kentucky Avenue, Raphael Street, Florida Avenue, California Avenue, Minnesota Avenue, and Wisconsin Avenue, submitted by the city of Green Bay.
All right, so I can give some background on this, and this is an action item. There is no public hearing held at Plan Commission. The public hearing will be held at Common Council. We had one inquiry of this from an adjacent property owner who just wanted some more information, but no objections. This was actually brought on internally by staff, the Department of Public Works and the Parks Department. This is over on the East Shore Drive. And there's, that was quite a mouthful of streets, but these are them to the south. Staff internally is doing a lot of cleanup As you can see, the future land use does have this as part of the wildlife sanctuary. You see a lot of wetlands, park space, green space kind of mixed in, and then you've got that residential along the bay. And then again, it's kind of a cleanup wildlife sanctuary. It's currently undeveloped. These roads came to fruition, the parcels didn't, and it's not intended for our future land use or current zoning. So this was something that Parks wanted to absorb. As you can, it's mostly wooded. I think initially when the public did reach out, they were concerned that we would be vacating to the north as well. And it's really just the southern half, and the Bay Beach Wildlife Sanctuary would be absorbing that and those parcels. So staff is recommending approval.
Okay, thank you so much, Madison. Yeah, I was confused until I looked at the map too. I was like, what? How are they going to do with those streets? People live there. But it's the streets continued and the lots continue across the street into the wildlife sanctuary.
So the southern portion is the ones that are proposed to be vacated.
And those are only right of way, they are not roads. That is, they have not been cleared or paved as roads.
Correct.
Yeah, if you drove through there, you would never know. It's only on the map that those show.
Right.
I'd make a motion to approve.
I second.
Motion by Commissioner Ravinsky, second by Commissioner Bremer. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, and then that moves forward unanimously to the next common council meeting, September 20th. Informational Director's Report. Mr. Stickschulte?
I must leave. I'm sorry. I wish I
That's
could.
okay. Thank you so much, Alder Hutchinson.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone.
Director Stickschulte messaged me and said he needed to hop off, and we don't have a director's report for the night unless Cheryl wants to say anything.
You know, the only thing I would say is I'm not sure if he's reported out that we were successful in receiving ARPA dollars for the comp plan from City Council. So yay, money is good when you talk about a large comp plan that will be starting, I'm sure, soon. So that happened. And then I also just wanted to mention that this will be Madison's last meeting for the Plan Commission. She's moving on to greener pasture. So I know you guys would want to say goodbye to her properly without her sneaking out. So I just wanted to thank her for her years of service with the city and wish her the best of luck in the future.
Thank you so much, Madison. Good luck.
Thank you.
All right, then moving on to annual update on land divisions.
Well, I think that's me actually again, so I can't quite sneak out. I try and sneak out quite a bit. Okay, so I'm just going to give a quick update. This is something annually that we like to kind of report back how many CSMs that we have and how many plats. So this year we had 11 so far. Last year we had 20. That was extremely, that was a lot. So I know we're about halfway through the year so far. So we may have, you know, another 10 or so, but these were the CSMs so far that have been approved or in progress. I believe we have another one on Adams Street coming in as well. And then our plats, it's quite common for subdivision plats and condo plats to not be recorded until the following year. There's a lot of kind of moving pieces in that with declarations, dealing with public works and drainage and stormwater management. But these were all of the ones that were recorded so far this year, which is pretty in line with last year, 5 and 4. And I did just want to highlight some of the second editions because the Woods Reserve is still in the preliminary phases. So this is the Sitka Heights condominiums, and that's a second edition that got approved. Second editions are often kind of alterations, more finer detail. really noting and working with the city to, have that infrastructure and those utilities. And this was the second edition for the Woods, as I said, and it's still in the preliminary phases. So it has only been approved as a pre-final at this point, but hopefully, working with Mach 4 that they will kind of have those final details submitted. So yeah, that was the land division update.
All right, thank you so much, Madison. And that looks like the date of the next meeting is September 26, 2022.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion by Commissioner Ravinsky to adjourn, second by Commissioner or Vice Chair Miller. All those in favor?
Aye,
Aye.
Any opposed?
and best luck, Madison.